Don't overthink it. Just go with the flow. The Daniel Natal Show. What is a telos? In Greek, it means an end goal, a purpose. Aristotle wrote, "Since actions in arts and sciences are many, the ends likewise come to be many. Of the healing art, for instance, health; of the shipbuilding art, a vessel; of the military art, victory; and of domestic management, wealth are respectively the ends." What the Greeks called a telos, wrote Cicero, is the supreme, the ultimate, and the final good. Telos is not a means to anything higher than itself, but rather it is the end to which everything else is a means. Aristotle gave his definition of happiness as the fulfillment of goals. For instance, a medical student who finally achieves a goal that called for sustained effort derives great pride and happiness by finally becoming a board-certified physician. In our culture, we often confuse happiness with fun. We're told to hedonistically pursue entertainment and encouraged to think that it leads to happiness. It doesn't. Edith Hall, in her book, Aristotle's Way, writes, "Yet we are confused about happiness. Almost everyone believes that they want to be happy, which usually means a lasting psychological contentment. If you tell your children that you just want them to be happy, you mean permanently. Paradoxically, in our everyday conversations, happiness far more often refers to the trivial and temporary glee of a meal, cocktail, email message." G.E. Moore, author of the influential classic Principia Ethica, takes issue with the modern proponents of hedonism, who equate pleasure with the good. This harks back as early as Epicurus in the ancient world, and found its best modern proponents in John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham. Moore is adamant that mere pleasure is not an end in and of itself. As Cicero pointed out, there are no statues dedicated to men whose sole goal in life was amusement. We respect people who did something hard. It is those individuals who achieve something difficult who are commemorated in bronze or marble. Learning a language may be difficult and require years to obtain fluency, but once mastered, this challenging endeavor is a source of lasting happiness. To return to the aforementioned Aristotle, he talks about the frustration in a person's life when their means don't match their end, their telos. Say, for instance, someone whose goal is to be a doctor, but instead he's working as a laborer. If the path doesn't lead to the destination, then the person will end up thwarted, unfulfilled, frustrated. We must, so far as possible, try to match up our means with the proper end, and to keep that end constantly in sight, directing our every small step towards it. Without that end goal, that telos, people expend wasted energy. The psychological duress of being in a hamster wheel that leads nowhere may, in extreme cases, conduce to substance abuse. The drug cocaine, for instance, releases dopamine in the brain, which simulates the same feeling someone gets from achieving a long sought-after goal. This is tricking the brain and cheating the addict. It's the joy of an accomplishment without the actual accomplishment. But as the effects of the drug wear off, the person crashes emotionally. Their dopamine-induced chimera dissolves into disappointment and a feeling of emptiness. In Greek, the word eidos translates as an inner shame and connotes a falling short of one's potential, of one's telos. So much pain and substance abuse in our society can be traced directly back to people who were never taught to conserve their energy and direct their steps toward a telos. Alistair MacIntyre, in After Virtue, talks about certain philosophers who abandon the notion of a telos, writing, "All reject any teleological view of human nature, any view of man as having an essence which defines his true end. But to understand this is to understand why their project of finding a basis for morality had to fail. The moral scheme which forms the historical background of their thought had, as we have seen, a structure which required three elements: untutored human nature, man as he could be if he realized his telos, and the moral precepts which enable him to pass from one state to the other. But the joint effect of the secular rejection of both Protestant and Catholic theology and the scientific and philosophical rejection of Aristotelianism was to eliminate any notion of man as he could be if he realized his telos. Since the whole point of ethics, both as a theoretical and a practical discipline, is to enable man to pass from his present state to his true end. A society that doesn't teach its children to pursue their telos is a society that sets its youth up for frustration and depression. Our society is shunting kids out and telling them that their purpose in life is to be a consumer, that the best thing they can do is spend. Like George Bush after 9/11, who told us that to not let the terrorists win, the best thing we could do is shop.
As we work with Congress in the coming year to chart a new course in Iraq and strengthen our military to meet the challenges of the 21st century, we must also work together to achieve important goals for the American people here at home. This work begins with keeping our economy growing. And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
To these people, Their vision of America is rival tribes united by a shopping mall. It's having a nation that's not a country, but a Walmart, a place where citizens don't exist, but where you're all expendable temps to be replaced by cheaper third world labor. Great evil arises from a society that it's lost its telos, because it's not only men who have a telos, but governments too. Aristotle says that the end goal of an oligarchy is the transfer of the wealth from the many to the few. The end goal of a democracy is equality, whereas the end goal of a republic is the promotion of virtue among the people. Is our government doing that? Is it promoting virtue among the people? Would you buy a refrigerator that forgot its telos, and that instead of keeping your food cold, told you that you could use its crisper like a junk drawer for pens, rubber bands, and paper clips? Would you buy a car that forgot that its purpose was to transport you places? How about a washing machine that neglected to wash your clothes but made a really good end table? In the 1950s, French philosopher Gabriel Marcel, in his book, Man Against Mass Society, warned about a government that forgot its purpose. He said that the natural end of such a government is collapse, but he said that in certain cases, it might be saved if reforms were enacted among the populace. He wrote, "This work of reformation consists above all in a restoration of values. We have to learn to grasp once more the distinction between the true and the false, the good and the evil, the just and the unjust. Slowly and painfully, like a paralytic who has recovered the use of his limbs and who slowly and painfully must relearn how to walk." He ends the chapter with the sentence, "One might say without any paradox at all that what men need most at the present hour is a course of treatment according to the prescription of Plato." Our freedoms are under attack, and yet the loss of freedom is not inevitable. America can be saved, and an informed citizenry can and will make the difference. Join us weekly for episodes of Beyond the Cover, and check out our print magazine too at thenewamerican.com.